All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another live stream. Today's going to be a fun one. So, again, not really working on traditional machine learning projects. I do want to get back into that. If I'm being honest, I'm just a little bit burnt out on some stuff. So I needed to take a break from that. I am taking a course next month on time series analysis, so I'm pretty excited about that. So definitely look forward to seeing probably some more content around that. But today, let's talk about ChatGPT. Or actually, well, let me take a step back. Let's talk about LLMs in general. So if you don't know what LLM stands for large language model, and it is basically the umbrella term that we refer to these basically really fancy chatbots with. So like obviously ChatGPT is the big one, but the reason I'm trying to use the more generic LLM term is because Google has announced that they are coming out with Bard, which is basically going to be their own version of ChatGPT. OpenAI has already announced that they are doing a partnership with Bing, and they are going to integrate some form of GPT into Bing. And so it like basically continue to refer to everything as ChatGPT. I've said this before, is very much like early 2000s parents referring to every sort of video game console out there as a Nintendo. So I'm trying, and plus, honestly, it's just a lot easier to type LLM. So what I want to cover today is how a software engineer, a software developer, or even a machine learning engineer, a data scientist might use ChatGPT to their advantage. Now, in full transparency, if you already have a lot of experience working with ChatGPT already, or any of the other LLMs, and you're here to maybe hear something new, to be honest, I don't think you're going to learn anything new today. This stream is really more intended for people who've done very little with any of these LLMs, and then you're a software developer or a software engineer, and you're wondering, okay, how might this change the way I work in the future? Or if you're a leader in the space or in some sort of IT space, trying to understand, okay, what can an LLM like ChatGPT offer my team? Now, full transparency, I personally don't use ChatGPT for my work. And part of it is I honestly don't know if my work allows me to use ChatGPT. So the extent of my use of ChatGPT has just been for a little bit of fun stuff outside of work on my own personal laptop. And I did prepare some material for today. So and just cutting to the chase, like it's been nice. But I personally not found it to be world changing for myself, and you'll see why, and we'll step into it. But it can be very helpful. But there's also some pitfalls to it too. So we'll talk about the pitfalls as well. So enough of me just rambling on. Let's go ahead and get into it. And as I start to pull up my screen, just be aware that I do have LinkedIn and YouTube's chats open. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop a question down there, and I would be glad to answer that. All right. Okay, so I'm going to be showing at least 5 different things that you can do with ChatGPT specifically here in the coding space. So, and I'm going to be doing it with my own code that I've written for one of these live coding streams or one of the blog posts that I've written before. We're going to be using my code. Okay, so the first thing that I want to show you is one of the. Well, I guess this is going to be kind of a 2-in-1. Or let's just cover the first part. But basically, I want to show you how GPT can be really helpful for documentation. And so the first thing I want to show you is let me go ahead and pull up this GitHub link here. So this is wrong GitHub link. I do want to show that one though. I will talk about that one in a little bit. So this here, for those of you who might recall, and if you don't recall, that's fine. This was part of our movie ratings project that we did a stream of about a year ago. It's hard to believe that it's been about a year now. And as part of that, we did some feature engineering, and so we created one special feature engineering function that basically takes in a pandas data frame, and it looks at the year of that the movie was released and compares it to the current year to develop this relative age. So let's imagine The Matrix came out. I don't know why I always go to The Matrix because it's always the year I remember. Well, 1999 was a big year for movies. So The Matrix, Fight Club, Star Wars Episode 1, like a bunch of movies came out that year, but I always remember 1999 for some reason. So, basically what this was doing is when the Matrix, we had a value here called year, and so it would be represent 1999. And so what this is doing is it's taking 2023 minus 1999 to produce a relative value of 24 years old. So that would be produce this new value of 24 years old. And so you can see here that I've created a docstring already myself for what this function does. So if you're not familiar with what a docstring is, or just a refresher, a docstring basically tells you, gives you 3 bits of information. Now docstrings are formatted in different ways. This is my preferred way of formatting one, but they all contain three bits of information. The first one is a general statement of what the function is intended to do. So that's what it's noting here is generating a movie age relative to the current year and the year that the movie was released. And then you have 2 other pieces of the docstring. So you have the arguments, or the inputs, if you will. And so the arguments here are just the data frame. So this is the data frame that contains the raw data for which year the movie was released. And then this is going to return the same data frame back, except it's going to contain a newly engineered feature value of year. Now, to be completely transparent, writing docstrings is a little bit tedious. Like it's not fun work, and sometimes it's not really, I don't know, there's not really a whole lot of value added to it, because sometimes, I mean, for this one here, like this function here, this is a very basic function. You could probably read this in probably a minute or two and understand what it's doing. And docstrings are really more important for, like, if you were, well, I don't want to discourage anybody from writing docstrings, but they're really more important for if you're building like a whole Python library or a Python module, and somebody's going to be using this over and over and over and over and over and over and over to understand what they're doing here. And in this case, it's really just me and then a couple of you other folks out there who watch the live stream that were using this. So, but what I want to show you is that so our first thing here is that ChatGPT can actually generate a docstring for us. So what I'm going to do here is I just copied the code in my clipboard, and I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to generate this docstring for me. Now I'm gonna have to delete the docstring, and you'll see what it does. And this is, I already did this before. By the way, I hope ChatGPT does not because I'm not doing like the paid version. I hope it doesn't like poop out on me, basically, because I am using the free version, and sometimes that does happen where if there's a lot of demand going on, then you can't use it. So I do have everything that I've done for today's stream over here, but I would prefer to do it live just because I think it's cool live. So anyway, so what I'm going to do here is ask ChatGPT. Let me zoom in. Can you... Actually, let me move my face out of the way. There we go. Can you write me a docstring for, not a doctoring, Apple docstring for the following function? And then I'm going to shift enter a couple times. I'm going to paste in my my code here. Now, like I said, I'm going to remove this docstring. So this is, I'm taking out the original docstring. All I'm leaving is just the bare function here. And let's see what the results are produced for us. Because the results that were produced for me originally were pretty impressive. Okay, so you can see here, and this is really cool about what ChatGPT does specifically, is it will have like the plain text language. So you can see the plain text language up here, and then you can see that it is starting to generate the actual output here. Now, this is a little bit different than the one that... Now, this is the interesting thing about ChatGPT is, like, when you ask a prompt like this, it will give you something... Like, it'll give you slightly different results each time. So this is actually a hair different than the first time result, but it's actually pretty cool in what we are seeing here. So, again, we are seeing more or less the same thing that I showed here. Now, note also as well, I did not tell ChatGPT what the function of this string was. Or I'm sorry, what the purpose of this function was. So it is generating its own understanding of what this function is intended to do. So let's go ahead and read this. So, and just as a reminder, so the original one, generating a movie age relative to the current year and the year that it was released. And then this one says, adds a new column to the input data frame representing the age of each year in years since the original release. Basically the exact same thing that I wrote, just in different wording. And then also we have the additional things of the parameters of the inputs. So you can see that it is taking in an input of a pandas data frame containing a year, and then it's returning back the data frame with an additional column. And then this is what I think is really cool, is that it even provides an example. So this is actually even, and I don't even know where it got this information from. I'm assuming that this is correct. It sounds correct. I believe the Shawshank Redemption did come out this year, or in this particular year. Although I'm looking at this does not seem right. Well, I guess 29 is correct. Yeah, sorry, doing some bad math in my head there. So you could see, I basically just gave it my function, copy paste. Excuse me. And it has spit back a docstring for me, and I can copy this, or I can do this right here. Click the little copy command, and I'm good to go. All I would have to do is paste this back into my code that I've written, and I'm on my way. So this is one really nice little thing. And so I do want to show the other example, because I've done this, like I said, I did this the other day. I'm trying to see where I did it. Okay, so this is the different example that it gave me. So this is, again, like I said, when you rerun the same prompt, so just helping you along with the verbiage as well, we refer to the input that we give ChatGPT, like the text input that we type in here, we refer to that as the prompt. And so this would be the prompt output. So each time you run the prompt, you will get different results every single time. And so this one's actually pretty close, and you'll notice it's a little bit different with what the arguments and the returns are, and that it has added inception here. I don't know why I chose to do that and not for the second time around. I got a cough again. Apologies. My family, we unfortunately just had, my wife had COVID a week and a half ago, and I got cold symptoms but did not test positive, and I'm like 99% better, but I've still got like a hair of a cough. So apologies for the coughing. I'll try to mute myself like that whenever I need to cough. So, all right. Anyway, so you can see here, this is one really cool thing that we can do with ChatGPT. So that's doc strings. Now let's go let's take a different bit of approach. So now I did have to write a little bit of new code here, but this is the thing that I started to pull up. So one of the very first blog posts that I wrote for the publication toward data science was a short one on how to do some reverse one-hot encoding. And so I pulled this code out and I deleted all the comments, the annotated comments, because what I want to show you next is another documentation thing that you can do. So we just talked about doc strings. Now let's demonstrate how we can use this for annotations. So I did already pull this out. I gotta load this up. I did this earlier today, or not earlier today, last night. Oops, sorry. Nope, it's in my desktop. All right, CD desktop. All right. Oh my gosh, I can't type. All right, Jupyter notebook. All right, there we go. All right, so this is basically the same code that I pulled out of that same thing earlier, and this is actually intentional to hear all these errors, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. So this is the other thing. So I have this code here. This code here is the same code that I did for this one blog post that I wrote a while back. But nothing in this version of the code is annotated. So let's see what ChatGPT will do if I ask it to annotate this code. Can you annotate this code for me? All right, and so I'm gonna do a tab, or I'm gonna enter a couple times there. All right, so here we go. So, and it is doing everything that we would expect it to do. So you could already start to see the output. So it recognized that this is the pandas library, and that we are aliasing it, that we are creating a data frame. We're creating a data frame that contains these different animal values. I read the word monkey there, and I got a little bit tongue-tied there. And basically, so coming back to what this code was doing, it was basically showing like, okay, so this is what a one-hot encode, or what do you call this? A non-one-hot encoded version of a column is, and then you have the one-hot encoded version here. Or no, I guess this would be the one-hot encoded version, and then showing how, like, if you, for whatever reason, if you wanted to take your one-hot encoding and convert it back to what the original one was, that's how you do this code. And so you can see that it has done everything here. And then this is the other cool thing. So in addition to annotating all my code appropriately, which it did just perfectly, it also provided a plain text summary of what this is doing. So it's saying this code takes a data frame of animal names, applies one hot encoding to the animal, removes the original column, and then adds a new name of the animal that appears most frequently. Now that's a little bit confusing. So this is where now we're starting to get to the territory where ChatGPT is not necessarily perfect. I mean, it is right, but it's also not right at the same time. So it is technically right because that's what the purpose of, like, when it says that it's creating a new column with the animal that it appears most frequently. That is correct. That is the purpose of what this index max function does. However, I'm using it for the purpose of reverse one-hot encoding. And that's what ChatGPT does not understand. And this is where, and this is the limitation of the LLMs in general, is that you have to have some sort of like subject matter expertise to really understand if the results are correct. I have personally, because you're always going to get some sort of result from ChatGPT. Like, I personally have never seen it tell me the word, like the phrase "I don't know." It'll tell you sometimes like "I can't do this," or "I'm not programmed to do this," or "I don't have access to the internet." But I've never seen it say "I don't know." Instead, it will always give you an answer, and sometimes, and a lot of the time, the answer is good, but sometimes the answer is not great. In this case, I'm going to give ChatGPT a pass because technically it is correct. But I have seen it give answers that are like really far left field. So I actually wrote a whole blog post about this like a month ago, or I guess almost 2 months ago now. And you can see it, you could read it on Medium. And basically, I tried to use ChatGPT to generate an image classifier that I would run or build out of a AWS SageMaker, and I had some pretty bad results with that. And I'm not going to spend this stream covering that. You can go read that if you want. But I did do it in the form of 15 different prompts. So, and I would say like maybe 11 of them were good, but 4 were bad. And the 4 that were bad were just enough because it like, sure. So it was 15, but they were all like sequential and like dependent on one another. And so like, even if the 11 are good, the 4 that are bad wreck the whole thing, unfortunately. So, like, the thing that I produced did not help me in the end. Well, and actually, let me go ahead and demonstrate this really quick. So, I wasn't planning on showing this, but I'll go ahead and show this little bit here. So, how do I install the TensorFlow object detection API on an M1 based MacBook Pro? Okay, because it's and you'll see what goes on here. Because like as it's typing this up, I've said this in other streams before. I love my M1 Mac, but it is not set up properly to necessarily do what. Or well, like okay, let me rephrase. Sorry, because I got distracted reading this output because this is a different output than I got the other day. Oh, this is funny. But anyway, sorry. The Apple Silicon architecture, because they changed the architecture of the chip, so a lot of these Python libraries and stuff are not optimized for the Apple Silicon chip. So you're seeing a bunch of instructions here, and these instructions look fantastic, but let me tell you, these are not right. Like these might work on an Intel-based Mac. So an Intel-based Mac is basically any of the Macs or the MacBook Pros that were created in 2020 and before. I think that's right. I think that's when they came out. So I bet this would work. What this is showing here would work for an Intel-based Mac, but this will not work for an M1-based Mac. So this is where you have to be cautious with ChatGPT, because these results look fantastic. And again, I'm sure it works great on an Intel-based Mac. This will not work on an M1 Pro-based Mac. Although I have to like maybe step that back a bit, because this is actually a different result than I got the other day. And I'll show you the result that I got the other day, because it's right here. It told me to do this. And this is again where you have to be really careful with ChatGPT in a business context because you are not going to get the same results. These are very different results than the results that we were just looking at. And so if you have, I don't know, let's step out of the software engineering domain for a minute. Let's say you have two, I don't know, call center people, and they're wanting to help a customer through some sort of IT support issue. And the customer's pretty heated because person A told them one thing and then person B told them another thing. And so then let's say the supervisor comes along and says, all right, why did you two say that? And it's like, well, we typed the exact same thing in the ChatGPT or LLM, and it produced these results, and it's got two entirely different result sets. So who's wrong? Well, neither of the individuals are. It's the model that's wrong. And to be perfectly clear, I'm not a naysayer of these LLMs per se, in the sense that because I think there are some people that would see that and say that these should never ever be used in a business context. To keep in mind two things. Number one, all models are well. I'm robbing a quote a little bit. I don't know who originally said the quote, but this is a quote that is in one of my coworkers' email signatures. It says all models are useful, only some, or all models. I'm screwing it up. It is something like all models are man, I can't even remember the quote. Well, she knows if she's watching who I'm referring to, and she's probably thinking what the quote is. I know what the quote is. It's basically this idea that models aren't perfect. The modeling results, not even just from an LLM, but from a standard binary classifier or aggressor. You're at best, I don't know, you're gonna get well, I mean, it ranges for any model, but you're never gonna get 100% accuracy on these things. So I will say, to be honest, I think it's a little bit premature for any business to be wanting to integrate any ChatGPT specifically, and because they are. This is basically what I've used this analogy before. This is like the iPhone 1 of LLMs. Today, the original iPhone came out in 2008. I was in high school still when the original iPhone came out. I actually saved enough money and I did buy it. And it was a revolution for the time. It was compared to my friends' flip phones. They were all just dumbfounded about how cool the iPhone was. But if you pick up an iPhone 1 right now and you compare it to the current iPhone 14, so you compare it to this guy here, the iPhone 1's kind of garbage now. And so that's how I'm kind of approaching all of these LLMs right now. And I don't mean to be I don't necessarily mean that to be insulting at all. This is very impressive, don't get me wrong, but will it be better? Absolutely, it will be better. But I just don't know how far down the road. And then at that point, maybe in 2 or 3 years, or maybe even sooner than that, it could be way sooner than that. That's when as a business leader, I would start to look at this as a real viable option. And then you also have to consider that Microsoft is has made this major investment in OpenAI, and is starting to bake that into their Microsoft products. So we may be if you are in a large enterprise today and you are already making use of Microsoft Office, you may already be getting this as part of a future update, pending that your company allows that functionality. Okay, so I went on a tangent there. All right, so let's move on to another thing. So we did a little bit about documentation. So let's pivot over into a different domain, and let's talk about explanations of things. So this here is a script that we wrote for our parking lot project, and this is a very basic script. And all this is doing is it's using the OpenCV library, so that represented here by CV2, to start a video capture from a USB webcam, and then basically keeps going until you hit the Q key, represented down here, and then it will stop. So let's say, so I've obviously annotated my code here like crazy to make it very understandable. Let's see what ChatGPT does if we ask it to explain us this code. All right, let me start a new chat. Okay, can you explain to me what this code is doing? And then while it's generating its output, the other thing I want to note here is that ChatGPT is very limited in the sense that you can't upload data or anything to it. So one of the biggest, like, we'll talk about debugging here a little bit, but one of the biggest problems with this as it manifests today is you could see that I'm pasting in all my code, and and every bit of code that I'm using today is not referent on like any real data. But imagine imagine I'm a data scientist or a machine learning engineer, and I load up a CSV with 10,000 rows of data, and I try to do some sort of feature engineering, and there's one record of that data set that is just hanging up the whole thing. Like, and so 10,000 rows, 9,999 of them are fine, but one of them is wrong. How do you know what's wrong with the one? Well, ChatGPT can't really tell you that, because ChatGPT can't look at the full context of whatever you're doing. So that is another limitation of these tools today. So and again, that is another major reason why I personally don't really use this. And we're starting to get into why I don't really use this, because you can see that it can be very helpful, but I'm this is going to sound bragging, but I am very good about annotating my own code already. I'm very good about writing my own doc strings, and I don't really need the explainers. Like, I generally understand what I'm doing, and most software engineers out there are going to relate. Like, we do learn new things for sure, but when it comes to your day-to-day job activities, it's most likely you are doing the same thing that you did last week and the month before, and you don't really need all these things. So I personally would not consider this an imperative tool for anybody. But anyway, so let's analyze the output here of what I did with this code. So so this is it did explain all this, right? So it's noting that we imported CV2. It created an instance. It's starting the video capture, and it's noting that it could be a built-in webcam or a USB webcam. It will start a while loop that will keep going infinitely until stopped. It grabs the frame and displays the frame appropriately in a window known as my webcam value. So I mean, all these steps are correct. These are 100% correct. So I mean, this is if I did not understand what this what this code was doing, this could be really helpful. And I think that's kind of the theme of this whole thing, is like this can be really helpful in certain circumstances. In other circumstances, it's not, and then in other circumstances, it's just not. It does not work, or is not. It's not set up to work in the way that you would want it to work. And ChatGPT claims that is not connected to the internet. I don't know how true that is. Like, because I'm pretty active on Twitter, and I follow a lot of different accounts that are pretty active using these tools, and they've been able to basically jimmy their way around something to produce results from the internet. So I'm kind of confused by that. But anyway, so that is how you can use ChatGPT for explaining code. So we've talked about annotations, doc strings, explainers. What do we want to do next? Let's do debugging. So I did mention that you can do some debugging. Back in this notebook, you might have caught that I intentionally messed something up here. So you can see in this cell here that I am instantiating a new pandas data frame, and then I want to view it appropriately by this column. So I'm setting up a column called animal, and I want to view the animals here. All right, can you? I'm sure that you already probably know what the error is here, but let's ask ChatGPT to see if ChatGPT can help us out here. All right, what is the bug in the following code, and how can I fix it? All right. So, yep, and it is spot on. So the bug in the code is that the column name specified in the brackets right here is not correct. So you'll notice that the column name is animal here, no S, whereas I tried to call it using animals, and so it is giving me some suggestions on what I could do. So it's telling me I could either rename the column, or I could access it appropriately by writing it just fine. So again, this was a super basic bug. But again, this is where it would be more challenging. I'm sure that something will come up in the future where you could actually work through this appropriately. But in the data science and machine learning space, when we I would say the the most frequent number of bugs that we run into has something to do with data cleansing or data engineering and something like that. And if I can't load in the full content of the data that I'm trying to work with into something like this, then it's not really helpful. So that, and that's, but I think that's just a today limitation. Again, remember, iPhone 1, iPhone 4 was probably the biggest leap forward, in my opinion, for the iPhone. That was the year that we got like the industrial look, the rectangular edges, the Retina display, the gyroscope. Why do I remember all this? This was like 2010. I guess I had nothing better to do at that time. I was in college and I was really obsessed with the iPhone. But I remember the jump. So it was iPhone 3G, iPhone 3GS, iPhone 4, and the jump from the 3GS to the iPhone 4 was like phenomenally big. Like that was the year. That was the year the iPhone became the iPhone, I think, in my opinion. But the original iPhone didn't even have an app store. I mean, they did add it in a software update after the fact, but at launch there was no app store. So again, I'm cautiously optimistic, or well, not even cautiously optimistic. I am just straight up optimistic that this will get better in this regard. All right, so that is debugging. We did explainers. We did annotations, and so let's go ahead and show like how we might do something that's kind of left field. So so far we've been taking existing code and asking ChatGPT to interact with it in in different ways. So this time I actually want to start with something with the assumption that I have no code at all. I have a general idea of what I want to do, but I need some help. So let's go ahead and and I'm going to do this in a domain that I'm pretty knowledgeable on. And so let's see what ChatGPT does here. So I'm going to write here, I want to create an API in Python with 2 endpoints. A post endpoint called predict and a get endpoint called health. Sorry, not Heath, health. Health. Oh my gosh, I can't type. Can you help me out with that? Okay. So I've done this before in other streams before where I've let me see if I can find one really quick even. I know I've done it before. Which one of these have I done it a part of? The Titanic BYOC. I definitely did that as part of this. So Titanic BYOC, we about a year ago we built a container in Fast API. And basically what I'm doing here is I basically want this same code here. So you can see here that this is how we set up an API, and we can call in to get inferences from the API appropriately here. And then we also have a health endpoint because many of these platforms require a health endpoint. So for example, this we deployed to AWS SageMaker, and AWS SageMaker requires that the endpoints be set up appropriately like this. So anyway, so let's go back in here and look. Okay, so in this instance, it says, sure, I can help you out, and it's using Flask. So you'll notice here that I used Fast API. There's no right or wrong answer here. I actually, whenever I first started off in my machine learning engineer role, we were using Flask more, and there's nothing wrong with Flask. We just found that there was a little bit of extra functionality that Fast API offers. So let's see how good this looks. So first endpoint. We got our health endpoint, and so this is all correct. So this isn't showing how we import Flask, how we instantiate the Flask object, and then down here, if we are invoking the Python script, like how to actually start up Flask. I'm a little bit... now, this is another thing that you have to be careful on. Here's another gotcha with ChatGPT. So this is starting it in debug mode. If you're not careful and you don't know what you're doing here, you don't necessarily want to keep debug mode on all the time. Like debug mode is great, obviously, for debugging, but when you are ready to put this in a production scenario, you don't want this on. So again, ChatGPT very much has to be vetted by your own experience. If you don't do that, you might have some bad results. Okay, but otherwise, this is correct. This all looks really good. So spot on here. Now, now this is what I think is really cool, and it's even showing how you start this up, or and how you might use Postman or curl to actually call the API. But so far, we've been doing just one level deep prompts. But the nice thing about these about ChatGPT or these other LLMs is they're conversational. So now, it built this in Flask, but let's say, this looks really good, but I would prefer it in Fast API instead of Flask. Can you do that for me? And now, so what it's going to do is going to take the same thing that it just generated above in Flask, and it's going to rewrite it in Fast API. So let's go ahead and see what it does here. So this is looking very much like we want it to look. So, all right, so it's all right, so the health endpoint, that looks good. Okay, it's taking a bit of a different approach this time, but it's not necessarily wrong. It is using the Pydantic base models or like as a response model. So that's not incorrect. It's not my preferred way of doing things, but this is correct. This is all correct so far. I am a little bit concerned though that it did not include Uvicorn. So Uvicorn is like the ASGI web server that actually starts up Fast API here. And this is where it's kind of curious because so again, I've already done these in the other windows. Let me wait for this to finish up here. Okay, I think it's done. This is all correct. Where did I do it here? Python API with 2 endpoints. So you can see here, I asked the exact same thing. We're getting different results though. So this is this very similar code. Now you'll notice here that it actually did include Uvicorn this time, and it even went a little bit further on. Like, hey, here's how you install Fast API in Uvicorn, and here's how you start it up with Uvicorn. And so but it's not wrong. So this over here was not wrong. It just was not really what I would have preferred. So you could even see this regenerate response down here. So I'm going to go ahead and click it just to show that it is going to give me a different result even than the one that we just ran. So let's go ahead and look at what that different result is. I wish I would have captured like a screenshot of what we were just looking at. But this is so now we don't see the Pydantic model in here. The Pydantic model has been removed, but no Uvicorn here. And I don't necessarily know why, but we are getting a different result. Not necessarily wrong, but it is what it is. But this is good though. So I would still say this is pretty good if you have no idea what you're doing. Well, you have a general sense of the direction of you want to go, but you don't necessarily know how to make it a reality. This is really helpful. This is I've referred to the ChatGPT as like a fancy version of Stack Overflow because it's basically giving information that you would receive back similar to Stack Overflow, except you don't have to go sifting through all these different responses. But just like Stack Overflow has some bad stuff on there, or outdated answers or answers that are relevant on one system like Windows and not relevant for Mac. And so you just have to be careful on Stack Overflow. And likewise, you do have to be careful with the LLMs as well. But it's still good. So let's do a different use case. So now you're not going to recall this, but let me just refresh you on something. So when we deploy models out to AWS using AWS SageMaker and their endpoint functionality, they offer this thing, this functionality to where whenever you call the API and you want to save the inputs and outputs, it will do that basically automatically. So it will take the inputs and outputs, and it will every time you call the API, and it will put it in an S3 bucket. Excuse me. But the one not bad thing, but the one unsavory thing about it is you don't necessarily get to define the format of how it's saved. And I don't know why AWS chose to do this, but they save the output of the AWS SageMaker endpoint logs as these JSON-L files, .jsonl. That is what the file extension name is. But if you look at what JSON-L is, and I'm to be transparent, I'm not 100% sure what JSON-L is, but it looks exactly like JSON to me. And in fact, you could download it and you can interact with it in Python just like it is normal JSON. So I don't necessarily know why they chose to go that route. So the question is how can that I've had is how can I convert the JSON-L logs into something like a CSV, something that's a little bit more consumable, something that myself and my fellow data scientists and my fellow machine learning engineers are more comfortable with working amongst. All right, so let's go ahead and ask that. So, all right, so AWS SageMaker endpoints save data capture logs in the form of JSON-L files that get stored in S3. How can I convert these JSON-L files into something more consumable like a CSV? And I'm pretty sure somebody on my team did actually figure this out. And so I'm curious to see what they're going to say here. Because this is actually already giving a different result than I got yesterday. And I think it's because I worded it kind of funkily. But let's see what it does here. So, this is a bad result. This is actually a very bad result. And the reason it's a bad result is because the way that, SageMaker saves its files, it will create a new directory structure for every single month, every single day, every single hour. And then actually you could have multiple JSON-L files in 1 hour. So let's say I've had an API running for a year, and then I will have 12 directories representing the years, and each one of those 12 months, representing the months, and each one of those 12 months I will have 24 hours. In each side of one of those 24 hours, I might have 2 or 3 JSON-L files. So the reason that this is unsavory is because this is saying, okay, so here's how you do the conversion for one of these files. I want to do it for all of them. And so this is actually not very helpful. Like this, I think this is helpful for one instance of one thing, but this is not necessarily what I want to see. Now, I did this the other day, and I worded it different, and actually these results were better. And so let's see what I did differently. So SageMaker endpoint save, I wanted to query those. Okay, so I didn't actually use the word CSV, so I think that may have thrown it off. So in this one, I actually think this one is a little bit more appropriate. So this is actually demonstrating that you want to create a crawler in AWS Glue, and then you use that glue crawler to create a table schema. And then if you're not familiar with AWS so much, so basically this is a kind of cool functionality that you can do through AWS here is, most people are very familiar with using standard SQL commands. So let's say you wanted to use SQL to query files like CSV files in S3 or something. You can overlay your files with what is known as this table schema represented by Glue here. And then you can use this service called Amazon Athena, AWS Athena, to run these standard SQL queries against the Glue table schema to actually pull your data out here. And so I actually think this is more along the lines of correct. Yeah. And so if you see here, then I actually ask, if I didn't want to do it with a Glue crawler, is there a way to do it without a Glue crawler? And I have a reason why. Well, I can't really explain why. I try. Yeah. Well, never mind. But anyway, so this is an alternative method, and it's even showing because I even did a couple of further prompts down here of asking what can you give me, basically elaborating more and more, can you give me more and more specifics? And even as we started to get to the very bottom here, I don't even know if this was necessarily correct here. Well, I actually do think it was correct, but it wasn't super helpful, because I think the problem is, well, actually maybe it was helpful and I just wasn't patient enough. But I am not necessarily a database expert per se, at least when it comes to Hadoop and stuff, and the things like these serd infos are these parameters are a little bit foreign to me. I guess I could have asked ChatGPT to explain what those meant. But this is why we have data engineers. So this is where I would bring in my data engineer friend, and he would help me out here. But I think this is mostly correct. Now, this again, though, if we come back to the way that this was described, this is not necessarily correct. I guess it's correct, but it's not what I wanted. So again, you just have to be careful here. And really, I think that brings us to the end of what I wanted to cover today, which is good because my voice is giving out. Coming to the end of the cold, my voice does not like to talk that long. So, any questions before we wrap up today? Because I don't know what else to show. So I hope we've demonstrated here how you could do some really cool things with ChatGPT. I wouldn't call any of these deal makers. I almost said deal breaker, but it's not a deal breaker. I don't know. Like, it was really cool and it could be helpful in some circumstances, but since ChatGPT's been out like 3 months now. I've never been like, there are some people on Twitter it's like that will like live and die by ChatGPT. So like saying, oh, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and I think it's fine. But I've not been aching to use it. And maybe that'll change. But we are in the iPhone 1 phase right now. As this thing continues to evolve, and also competitive products like Google Bard comes out. And I bet Meta's coming out with something, because I follow a AI director and scientist, Jan LeCun, on LinkedIn and Twitter, and like somebody asked him like directly, is like Meta working on something, and all he replied back was a winky face. So all these big companies are coming out with their own variants of these things, and again, that's why we need to start using the generalized term of LLM instead of ChatGPT, because brand what is that? Brand specificity versus generality, I guess. So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up there. I didn't see any questions or anything, so hope you all enjoyed this one. Short stream today, I guess, but I'll give you back your weekend. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I will see you maybe next week. I don't know what we're going to do. I haven't really thought about it yet, but I'll think about it. So see you later. Hope you have a good one.